Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Why Do We Teach with me, Miss Corshell, Miss Adenike, and Miss Wella. We are now in week 6 in chapter 6 discussing written response assessments. The list of objectives and reflection in this episode that we will talk about are Objective 1, planning a written response assessment. Objective 2, developing a short answer and extended written response item. Objective 3, developing two types of scoring guides, checklists and task-specific rubrics. Objective 4, being able to audit a written response assessment for quality. And Objective 5, using written response assessments formatively with students. Now we're going to start off with Miss Question for objective number 1.
Yes, thank you, Jalen, for that amazing introduction. So, yes, I have objective number one, which is to plan a written response assessment. And I wanted to discuss a little bit about what a written response assessment is. And a written response statement includes both the short answer and the extended answer responses, and also a written response. Purpose is for students to have a deeper understanding of the knowledge that is being taught by requiring them to give like extended answers to the questions that's being asked. So, for example, if I was like a history teacher, I could be like, the question could be the Industrial Revolution brought significance economically, socially, and political changes to the United States in the 19th century. Using specific examples, explain how the Industrial Revolution affected at least two different groups of people and evaluate whether its overall impact was a positive or negative effect. And so, pretty much, the students will be required to have at least a 2 to 5 paragraph reflection and have a thesis statement. Also, they could have supporting arguments with their evidence to support these arguments and also address positive and negative effects as well, and also have a conclusion of the topic overall supported by the evidence. And that would be like a great demonstration of like a written response assessment. It's requiring them to have a deeper understanding, also requiring to do more research, and supported by their evidence. So yes, that is my written response assessment plan. So yes, Miss Ananike, it is your turn.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. You actually set me up really, really good. Because I'm supposed to be talking about like how to develop a short answer and extended response item. So, you explained it very well. So, like the biggest thing about like I'm gonna start with the short answer. The biggest thing about short answers is that, we're supposed to we require the students to construct a brief response and typically like a sentence or a short paragraph. So, we're not looking for like an essay or anything. This is like, here's a question, give me a quick answer to it, but you have to come up with it yourself. These are really good because they're effective at understanding, reasoning, or application. But the key to actually writing them is that they have to be specific, focused, and they have to and you have to make sure that you have the right depth. So, an example for me, or no, sorry, not an example, some word that you would use would be like explain XYZ, compare this to that, describe this, justify this. So, it's not necessarily like looking for them to dig deeper. It's just like, hey, here's this concept. Do you know what it is? Can you explain it to me? Can you describe it? Can you like, if that makes sense. And the extended written response is where you do want a little bit more depth, is where you want them to dig deeper and start connecting dots to create their own ideas. Um, so this looks like analyzing a scenario, defending a claim, solving a multi-step problem, or synthesizing multiple ideas. So the key here is that you need to make sure that your context is clear. So if you're like if I'm talking about a DNA replication, I can't just say, oh, analyze the use of a helicase. It's just like, because for one, that's very point blank, but two, it's just like, well, it does this here, but it also has to unzip and then zip it back and this. So it's like, it's not really much for the students and they can get lost in that question. So then you will have a correct answer, but you're going to have students giving you explanations. Not that they're wrong, but it's also not hitting what you wanted them to talk about. So it's very important that when you write the questions that you have clear context, defined expectations, and guiding components. So an example of this would be for science would be analyze the causes of an insertion or deletion in DNA replication and evaluate their impact. So a student would ideally give me like, oh, well, during DNA replication, if a nucleotide is inserted or deleted, the this will lead to what's the word I'm looking for? This will lead to protein synthesis to possibly be affected because when it goes through translation, um it will possibly cause a mutation in the protein. So it's causing them to think further, like, okay, well, if this happens at the beginning of DNA replication, what's going to be the effect at the very, very end? So this is where they're combining multiple ideas because, yes, we talk about DNA replication in the central dogma. Well, DNA replication, excuse me, is a part of the central dogma. So they're having to connect the whole ideas together. And there's one last thing I wanted to say. Um, so yes, this question asks the students to have full knowledge and assess the impact. The another important case was, and you need to make sure that you have effective prompts to avoid unnecessary complexity. I already said that kind of. And it is important to ensure that prompts truly measure the intended target. So just make sure that if your goal is reasoning, that you actually require explanation in the question. If it's communication that you wanted, then make sure that you have explicitly stated that. Ultimately, well-designed written response items provide insight into student thinking that selected response items cannot captivate. I know that was a lot. I apologize. But it is really important that we write good written response because, like I said, you can confuse the students, you could mess it all up, you could not hit your targets, and then it was a waste of everybody's time and etc. So, I will now pass the baton over to Miss Jalen.
Thank you, Miss Adenike. That was a good. You had a good one. All right. I have checklists and task-specific rubrics. So basically, these are two types of scoring guides. They help teachers assess stuff during instructional time without the hassle. So to develop a checklist, you must make a simple list of key things students need to do or to show you. And then you have boxes that say yes or no if they completed it. So these are like straightforward and quick checks whether the kids got their information down packed or if they need help. So, for example, in PE class, if we were to start on a soccer unit, some things on my checklist would have if a student is able to kick a ball with the inside of their foot, I would say yes or no. Or if a student looks at a target before kicking, I would say yes or no. If a student kicks the ball on the ground, I would say yes or no. And if the ball stays in place in a safe position, I would say yes or no. So with these, I would observe it, mark it off, and then I would be able to know if they nailed the technique or if they still need a little bit of work. So on the other hand, task-specific rubrics add levels of quality to the criteria. So it's not just yes and no if they got the skill down pat, but it's a little deeper, just a little bit. So I would pick 3 through 5 main criteria from the task, and then I would make it into performance level from 1 to 4. So 1 being the lowest and 4 being the highest. So going back to the soccer skill, if we did that, number 4 would be accuracy, like they are able to kick the ball, and number 1 would be not able to kick the ball at all or learn to kick the ball. But those type of assessments helps kids know exactly what it looks like and know what exactly they are able to do, and gives me detailed feedback without having the hassle to write like those long papers and essays, and it saves the teacher so much time, and both the students and the teacher are able to know up front whether if they understand the target learning goal that they're trying to learn. So that is my explanation of objective number 3. I'm gonna pass it to Miss Wale.
Hey, what's up? All right. So I have audit a written response assessment for quality. So just going back into your checklist, how can you make sure that your checklist is accurate or fair, clear? So one to understand what is auditing a written response, it is evaluating how well the assessment is designed. Does it align to the learning targets? Is it clearly written? Is it scored properly? Is it scored fairly? And capable of producing accurate information about students' understanding. A couple of things I remember reading about that it goes over when looking at auditing is, does it align? I'm just reinstating some of it. Does it align? Does this assignment really measure what it's supposed to measure? Would students understand the task? Could teachers score it consistently? would the result give useful information? I think that's an important thing. What kind of information are you putting out there? Like I remember Adenika was talking about in the end when she said, hold on, let me go back to my notes. When she said writing good written response, making sure your response is what it is that you want it to, the result of it is accurate as what is it the teacher is looking for. So with auditing, those are the things you want to look for. So a quick checklist is step one, you want to make sure that it aligns to the learning target. Step two, you want to evaluate the prompt quality. Step three, evaluate appropriate method. And then step four, you want to review the scoring guide as a, to make sure everything is right. Step five, evaluate the rubric levels. Step six, check fairness and the accessibility. And step seven, you want to review evidence of use. And then the last thing you want to do is just really make sure that it lines up with your targets. That was a quick checklist, but in all, pretty much you are just looking to make sure that when you're auditing that your written response assessment aligns with your learning targets, that it clear, that the scoring part is fair and is accurate and is capable to produce accurate information about the students.
Well, thank you, Miss Willette, for sharing your objective. So we're going to move on to objective number 5, which is use a written response formally with students. And how I would do this is at the end of the lesson for the day, I would ask the students pretty much a reflection question on what they learned. And it would be a written response to a prompt asking a question related to the lesson for the day. So for example, it would be in your own words, explain the most important concept of what we learned today, or give a real life example of how you would use what we learned. And then I would discuss with the students their responses and answer pretty much any questions they would have after the reflection. So that's just kind of my input on that.
I said something very, very similar. I essentially used the idea of like exit tickets. I don't know if any of y'all teachers ever did that. But like how I was thinking about using it was like, still doing written response, asking the students to explain whatever concept we was talking about. Because then this allows the teachers to identify certain misconceptions like immediately, because whether or not we get a chance to talk about it like before leaving or first thing in class, I'll be able to see by the end of that day after I've seen all my students like, oh, okay, this core really did not understand this core got it, this core didn't. And then I'll be able to address it, like I said, even first thing, or just make sure that the next lesson is tailored, and I might go back to it like, hey, I looked it over the exit tickets, you guys didn't understand this, we're going to talk about this real quick just so we all get it, and then we're going to move on. But the biggest thing that I wanted to mention was like feedback is crucial, because there's no way that you use a short answer formatively and then not give feedback, because the whole point of formative assessments is to make sure that everybody's on the same page as to where we are in understanding. So yeah, exit ticket. So we literally said the same thing, but I just
Yeah, I was gonna say that, and then give an example in PE. So,
yeah,
awesome. Because if it's more than one student that didn't answer that exit ticket right, I know it was me who messed up. Like
you
I
know
didn't
what
keep
I
it right.
mean? Yeah.
So then I just take that feedback, and then that's when I'll say, "We got to learn this lesson again when you come back." So thank you. But yeah, that's what I had to say. Y'all did awesome. Thank you, ladies. All right, we're on to
All right,
the
so
reflection.
all right. In conclusion?
No, reflections.
Reflection.
Reflection? Oh, sorry.
Yes, reflection. So yes, I have reflection number 1. Hey, it happens. Reflection number 1 is which ideas in this chapter did you find most convincing or useful, and why? So I did notice like on page 168 in the chapter, it talks about how to use and redefine assessments. And the reason why this is most convincing for me is because it pretty much gives teacher a guideline on um, how to decide if they should use the assessment and what changes need to be made for improvement. And also, this can be done by reflecting on the students' clarification for what they learned in their responses. Also, where students are able to have a clear understanding of what they are learning. And also, it suggests using a rubric to grade your own assessment to see if it's helping your teaching progress overall in your students. So that's my reflection.
Thank you for that. I had how does this chapter align, or like what concepts align with your beliefs? And my overall thing is I always loved open response as a student, because I shouldn't say I always use that as an opportunity to get away with not knowing stuff, but I for sure use that as an opportunity to get away with it. Because I remember it was when I was taking, what class was that? That was English like 2 or 3, and we were reading some book that I was not up to date with the book, but a lot of the questions were open response. And I remember it was like some idea that she wanted us to use, like whether it was ethos, pathos, I can't remember. But I remember just using it to a part of the book that was prior to, not the chapters we were supposed to be taking the test on. It was the chapter beforehand. But she still gave me full credit. And I was just like, awesome. I know that was not on the chapters that you wanted me to talk about, but it was open response. So she was really looking for, okay, do you know what ethos is? Do you know what pathos is? I think I do, but just not in the concept of chapters 7 through 10, because I did not read those. So that's why I love open response questions just as a student, because it allows you to kind of show your understanding, even if you don't have a complete understanding of it, because you can show like, okay, like with the question I gave earlier about the insertion and deletion. As long as if I had a student that was just like, oh, an insertion and deletion will change the DNA further on, it's just like, oh, okay, you understand what happens with an insertion and deletion, even though I was looking for you to go further with the whole central dogma, protein synthesis, etc. But you didn't go that far, but you understand that there is a difference. So I can still give you partial credit, if not full credit, but that's not something you can get with a selected response. You know what I mean? A selected response, if I said what happens to the protein synthesis after an insertion or deletion, and you're like, ooh, I don't know, but it's ABCD, you don't get full credit for your partial understanding. I'm sorry, you don't even get partial credit for your partial understanding. You just don't get any. So that was my biggest thing. So it aligns with my beliefs perfectly. Like, I think written response is awesome for both formative and summative, because it shows understanding what little you have, or as much as you have, I should more so say. And yeah, and summatively, it actually can show you how you can apply the knowledge. So, yeah, I think written responses are excellent tools in general. I prefer those over selective response. Like, I have a midterm tomorrow, and she said most of them are open response, and the rest of the class is like, but I was like, ooh, like that might help me out a little bit, just a little bit. So, yeah, but that's how this aligns with my own beliefs.
Okay, my reflection was what strategy would it was basically what strategy did I like. The strategy from the reading that I find most useful would be the checklist. Doing the checklist in PE is very useful. It's quick, easy, and fast, and it helps me be able to group students in terms of who still needs help with a skill and who doesn't. So a quick little question like, are you using your finger pads when bouncing the ball, or is it hands, elbows, and step when we're focused on basketball passing now? So now I give them like really quick questions to the answers, and sometimes they know and sometimes they don't. So that really helps me put them in groups and like see which ones I can work with and see which ones are like perfect at it. So for me, checklists are awesome, especially for kindergartners, because they're always moving. So I can't just be like, I have to
They so
hurry up.
busy.
Yes, you do got to keep them busy. You can't just have them bored. But for me, it's checklist. Thank you, Miss Weather.
All right. Sorry, I was so ready to conclude. But my
Okay.
my reflection question: what part of this chapter makes you feel uncertain, nervous, or hesitant about applying in practice? For me, As I listen to you talk about health and PE, I think other teachers have to understand we see about everybody in the building. So I have about 400 students. And so I'm looking for the quickest way to get through assessment, lesson, and all of that. So for me, one part of this chapter that makes me feel uncertain is developing and using scoring guides, especially task specific rubrics, because um, I see everyone in the building. So I'm literally looking at what is the quickest way to make sure I have clear targets and the kids are learning what they need to learn and that my assessment deliver what it's supposed to deliver. So that's kind of scary for me. And I'm just being honest because as a health and PE teacher, it's so easy to kind of use, like you said, checklists or something a little bit easier to just get on by to say, oh, yeah, I did assessment because just having a load of so many kids and how many papers I would have to look at. That's one of the reasons why now I incorporate technology within my classroom whenever I'm doing assessment where they can get in groups and I put it over my smart board and they can see and then go ahead and then that way incorporating technology into what I do. So that's my biggest fear. And then also like just making sure um the importance of defining like clear criterias and stuff like that. So that's what makes me feel uncertain and nervous. It's just making sure that my scoring guides and especially task specific rubrics are all in line. Yes. So in
I agree.
conclusion, all right, so everyone has shared their reflections, correct?
Yes,
Yes, yes, yes.
sir.
All
Sounds
right.
like we all think that written responses and checklists, and again, I feel like it always goes back to planning every single week.
Yeah,
In
Like,
all
and
cases,
then
every week it keeps going back to planning. Like, hey,
and
you gotta
that's
plan
the
all
thing.
week.
It's like now for us encore teacher, they are starting to take more of our planning time to
Oh,
do pull out groups, like go into the classroom and help kids start behind with like reading or math.
oh,
And so like you set these expectations for us and I don't think like leaders or admin realize like we literally see everyone in the building. So the expectations is to always have assessment and making sure your classroom, your learning targets, everything is up.
but then you're
But
also taking away my planning time.
thank
Like I said,
you.
you need that time to get.
Wait, what?
So how does that work?
See, but I feel
So
like
that's
it's
why I say you really have to find the best way that fits your health and PE class because seeing everyone in the building, that's a lot for assessment. So that's why you have to find really what really works for your classroom. But in conclusion, these are a couple of words I heard that all of us spoke about: short answers, brief response, making sure that context is clear, giving feedback, exit ticket. I really love that. We actually used that in our meeting today. Um, and also like understanding and how to apply your knowledge. There's a couple of words I heard as we talk about chapter 6 and going through reflection and answering objectives. So in conclusion, to wrap everything up, chapter 6 emphasize that written response assessment are tools for measuring students' understanding and reasoning. High quality prompts clearly define the thinking that task. I'm tongue tied right now. Provide appropriate context, like you talk about, Adenike, and then guide students um, towards what a strong response includes. So the chapter also highlights the importance of selecting the right scoring approach. Like you talk about a checklist, and I mentioned in their rubric. So overall, those are the things that chapter 6 clearly covers. And fairness. I forgot to cover that. Ensure fairness and consistency, which is very important, especially when you're dealing with children. You want to make sure that everything is really consistent, and then providing feedback as well. So those are the things we'll talk about and what chapter 6 really covers in conclusion, to just make sure that assessments covers those things and making sure that it aligns with your learning targets. All right.
Well said,
I
ma'am.
agree.
Right.
Mhm.
You wrapped that up in a bow. All right. Well, I think that is all. So I'm going to say toodaloo, you all.
All righty.
All right.
You guys,
Bye.
bye.
Bye.